Hello everybody! Welcome to my weekly wrap-up of January 31st, 2016, wherein I tell you about all the books I read this past week. It's the last day of January, and I just want to take a moment to say thank goodness. January has not been the greatest of months, the weather has been depressing, other things have been stressing me out, and this past week was the climax of all that was wrong with the month, and I'm glad it's over. I'm really hoping February is a much better month. I have lots of reading plans, I would like to be able to keep them. Mostly, I would like to be happier and more cheerful and less stressed out and anxious, because that sucks. Of course, books will help me with that, and so will all of you guys. I feel like I've been kind of disconnected from anything that's not immediately physically present in my life as a problem that I need to solve. So my head has really not been in booktube or like on Twitter or anything, and I'm sorry about that if it feels like I'm kind of gone. I'm not gone, I'm just inwardly gazing a lot. But what we're really here about today is the books. The first thing I finished this week is no surprise, the 9th book in the Young Wizard series by Diane Duane called A Wizard of Mars. I enjoy this a lot. I am now done with my reread. I've really enjoyed rereading this series, and I really need to film that overview of the entire series, but recall what I just said about January and not being in the greatest of headspaces, so yeah. This was kind of my therapy for the week. Actually, this is my therapy for the month, rereading Young Wizards. Just so good for my mood. After a couple of weeks of trying to read this book, I finally finished The Long Utopia by Terry Pratchett and Stephen Baxter. This is a soft science fiction series. It's the 4th book in the Long Earth series, and I have some thoughts about this. I'm not sure how much I want to bash this book because it's a certain level of average, and I don't think it pretends or aims to be anything more than mediocre, mildly entertaining science fiction. And if that sounds insulting, I'm really sorry, but I think that's probably the truth here. It's enjoyable, absolutely enjoyable for what it is, but don't think too hard about it. I definitely think that the first book in the series is the best, and if you're curious about the series, go read that and then drop it if you don't want to read any more. But the premise is that all of humanity discovers that they can step east or west into an infinite number of alternate Earths or universes in which things went slightly different with Earth. So on this one day called Step Day, all of the people learn that this is possible, and people start migrating into these pristine wildernesses of untouched worlds where there are no other sentient people. This series really explores what happens when people can just leave their lives and go start completely fresh somewhere else where no governments and no other people can really control them or even find them. How does this affect the societies and cultures and economies of the original Earth called the Datum? So I really enjoy that part of the series, but by this point in the 4th book, that has kind of been lost. We're now 40 or 50 years after Step Day. A lot of stuff is shaken out, and it just feels like the series is being drawn out too long now. It also follows a couple of the same characters. I think that Joshua Valiente, who is a natural stepper, he's supposed to be the main character, but in this book, in The Long Utopia, he's not the main character. He shows up, he does absolutely nothing, he's getting old, he has a birthday, and he talks to some people, and I was like, what? He's so boring. Like, a third of the book is taken up with some other character researching Valiente's family history 300 or 400 years ago. It has no bearing on the actual plot of the book. It's so weird. That's my biggest complaint about this, is that the structure of the book is just packed with filler that does not connect at all. The best character, in my opinion, is Sally Lindsay, because she is contradictory. She's got a lot of dissonant things in her character. She's crotchety and old, and she doesn't like people. She's very antisocial, very anti-government. She just doesn't like people, and yet she lives her life helping people in the Long Earth. I don't know, I really liked her, and I can't say that I really enjoyed the ending of this book because of what it meant for her character, and also Lob Sang, because I don't really like Lob Sang, but he's also way more interesting than Valiente. That kind of turned into a rant anyway. I have issues with plot and with characters at this point. I will read the 5th and final book when it comes out this year, whenever I can get my hands on it, but this is a very solid 3-star series for me, and I read the books in between meatier, heavier things. The next thing I finished was a mystery. I read Clouds of Witness by Dorothy L. Sayers, which is the 2nd book in publication order in the Lord Peter Wimsey mysteries. Very much enjoyed this one. I read most of it in a day. It was just good, fun, light, very British. I don't know if it's meant to be a parody of like upper British society or not, but it was really enjoyable. The story of this one is Lord Peter trying to get his brother off of a murder charge. A man who is Lord Peter's sister's fiance ends up dead at their family lodge out in the country, and Lord Peter has to discover who really killed him, because no way did his stuffy older brother shoot him. So I like this one a lot because you see Peter interacting with his family members so much. His brother, his sister, his mother. Also, Lord Peter has like this bromance going on with Detective Parker, and I love that. I love their conversations. There were some moments where I actually laughed out loud because of these like little zingers. They were just messing with each other and making jokes while they were doing things. I really enjoyed that. I think that Peter is much more human than Sherlock Holmes, and maybe more human than like Poirot. I haven't read that many of the great detectives of like the golden age of detective fiction, but Peter, just, I like him. I like reading about him. He might be a little bit too perfect, but he does have some pretty interesting flaws as well, including like he has PTSD from the First World War. So yeah, I am reading the 3rd book now, and I'm also really enjoying it. The last thing that I read this week was Akata Witch by Nnedi Okorafor, and thank you so much to Nicole from Darker Brain and Chris from Crisper's Book Nook who talked this book up so much and were recommending it to everybody, because I finally picked it up and I really enjoyed it. And it was actually an interesting, like, culturally challenging book to read, and I really appreciated that. I was just thinking about that a lot while I was reading it. This is a middle grade or YA book. I probably say YA based on some of the language and other content in it, about an albino Nigerian girl named Sunny. She was actually born in America, lived there for a few years, and now lives back in Nigeria with her family. She discovers that she has magical juju powers, and it is her entry into this world of the leopard people. That's what they call their witches or magicians in Nigeria. And with 3 of her friends, she forms kind of like a coven, an Oha, I think is what it's called, of 4 people who are kind of balanced in personality and powers, and they go through some training and then have to take on a very powerful bad person who is kidnapping and killing children. Which, when I say it like that, this sounds like this is a very alarming, dark plot, like a young girl is taking on a serial murderer. Yeah, it is. That's one of those reasons why I like this, because it was not like some of the YA or middle grade fantasy I've read. It felt very real and immediate, and like, these children are not coddled, they're not special snowflakes. They really struggle and they are put in danger. They are like consciously put in danger by their mentors, by adults in their lives, and there are real adult painful consequences if they screw up. And that was just like, oh wow, this is not an American way of doing things. So that was kind of challenging to me on a certain level, because especially with Sunny and her parents and her family, I was like, holy crap, you don't treat your child like that. Wait, this is not America. Gotta get out of that mindset that all has to be the way, like, where I live. So I really enjoyed that. It's a good story, really interesting characters, very much not like characters I've ever read before. And is this going to be a series? I think that the 2nd book is finally coming out this year. I think that's been announced by Okorafor, and I'm really looking forward to it. Those are the 4 books that I read this past week, and if you have read them or you want to read them, please comment down below and talk to me. I always love hearing from you guys. My biggest plan for next week is to participate in Brickathon. January 31st, today is actually the first day of Brickathon, and the idea is to read one book that is more than 700 pages long in 7 days or something like that. I will put Libby Stevenson's video about it up here, because if you want to start, today's the first day to start. I'm going to be reading Don Quixote, so I'm going to be reading a 940 page book in 7 days, on top of doing some other things as well. I'm really looking forward to it though. It's going to be a very interesting challenge. So that is it for me this week. Hope you guys are having a great weekend. I've enjoyed decompressing these past 2 days, and I'll be back to talk to you guys again soon. And until then, bye.